That night, long after Daniel had driven away, I sat alone in the quiet of my kitchen with a glass of untouched wine in front of me. His words repeated in my mind like a song I couldn't escape. You deserve more than being left alone all the time. You shouldn't have to settle for being invisible. That word had cut deeper than I wanted to admit, because it wasn't just a casual observation. It was the truth I had been avoiding for years. I stared at the wine, the light catching the rim of the glass, and thought about the years I had poured into my marriage. The dinners alone, the late nights waiting for a phone call that rarely came, the quiet, polite conversations when he was home, as though we were roommates sharing space instead of partners sharing lives. I had convinced myself that it was enough. That marriage meant compromise, patience, endurance. That Daniel's voice, low, steady, insistent, had cracked something open inside me. He had seen what I thought no one noticed. He had spoken aloud the longing I had buried. And now, I couldn't push it back into silence. I should have been angry. I should have been offended. After all, he was my son-in-law. Those words, that look in his eyes, they should have horrified me. But instead, they haunted me. When I closed my eyes that night, it wasn't my husband's face I saw. It was Daniel's. The intensity of his gaze, the conviction in his voice, the way he made me feel seen, cherished, alive. It terrified me how easily the thought of him slipped into places I had guarded for years. The next morning, I moved through the house in a daze. I tried to distract myself with chores, with reading, with anything that might dull the restless energy twisting inside me, but every sound reminded me of him. The rumble of a passing car outside made me glance toward the window, half hoping it was him again. I told myself it was ridiculous. I told myself it was dangerous. But the human heart doesn't bend to logic, and mine was already bending toward him in ways I couldn't control. Days passed, but the memory of that ride to the store clung to me. I replayed every word, every glance, every silence. I tried to convince myself it was harmless, that Daniel had only meant to comfort me, that I had misread everything. But deep down, I knew I hadn't. The real question wasn't whether he meant it. The real question was what it meant for me. I began to notice things I had ignored before. The emptiness of my husband's side of the bed. The way my phone never lit up with his messages unless he needed something. The absence of laughter, of touch, of intimacy. I had accepted it for so long that I hadn't realized how hollow I had become inside. And now, Daniel's words echoed in the hollow spaces. You shouldn't have to settle for being invisible. One afternoon, a few days later, Emily called me. Her voice was light, cheerful, full of casual updates about work and plans. She mentioned Daniel in passing, how busy he'd been, how thoughtful he was. I murmured in agreement, my heart pounding as if I carried a secret I couldn't share. Because that was the cruelest twist of it all. Emily adored him. My daughter had found what I had always wanted. A partner who was present, attentive, devoted. And yet it was that man, her husband, who had turned my world upside down with a handful of forbidden words. I told myself I had to stop there, that I had to bury the feelings before they grew. But late at night, when the house was quiet, and I lay staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but wonder what it would feel like to hear him say those words again. Or more. The next time I saw Daniel was at a family dinner the following weekend. Emily had invited us all, eager to bring some warmth into the house. I dressed carefully that evening, more carefully than I wanted to admit even to myself. Okay. Soft dress, nothing extravagant, but enough to make me feel noticeable. When Daniel opened the door and greeted me with that familiar smile, my breath caught. For a moment our eyes met, and in that instant the rest of the world faded. I saw the flicker of recognition in his gaze, the memory of what had passed between us in the car. Dinner was a blur of conversation and laughter, but beneath it all ran an undercurrent I couldn't ignore. Every time Daniel poured me a glass of wine, every time his hand brushed mine as he passed a dish, every glance across the table, it all carried weight. Subtle, unspoken, but undeniable. And then, as I helped clear the dishes in the kitchen, he leaned close enough that his breath brushed my ear. "I meant what I said," he whispered. The plate nearly slipped from my hand. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might break through my chest. I turned to him, words caught in my throat, but before I could respond, Emily walked in, smiling, oblivious. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop trembling. Not from fear, but from the realization that I was standing at the edge of something I could no longer ignore. His words had taken root inside me, growing into questions that refused to be silenced. What if he was right? What if I did deserve more? What if everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, myself wasn't the whole truth at all? I should have been stronger. I should have shut it down, told him never to say such things again. But the truth was, a part of me didn't want it to end. A part of me was already leaning toward the fire, knowing it could consume me, and yet unable to step back. And that was how it began. Not with a kiss, not with a touch, but with words. Words that slipped past my defenses, unraveled years of silence, and left me questioning everything I thought I knew. Because once you've been seen, truly seen, you can never go back to being invisible. And I wasn't sure I wanted to. The air inside the car still carried that strange, lingering warmth from our short drive. But as Daniel and I walked side by side into the grocery store, I felt like the world had shifted slightly beneath my feet. It wasn't supposed to feel like this, an ordinary errand, a simple kindness from my son-in-law, and yet my heart refused to settle into the rhythm of normalcy. The automatic doors slid open, welcoming us with the cool blast of air conditioning. I gripped the handle of my shopping cart as if it could steady me, but Daniel reached over, his hand brushing mine as he took control of it. "I'll push," he said casually, but there was a softness in his voice, something protective. I nodded, letting him take the lead. We moved slowly through the aisles, my list trembling faintly in my hand. I kept telling myself it was just the oddness of the situation. Shopping with Daniel instead of my husband or daughter, that made me feel so unsettled. But deep down, I knew it was more. He asked about little things, whether I liked one brand of bread over another, if I preferred red or white wine, if I needed help reaching something on the top shelf. Every question was small, yet each one carried an intimacy I wasn't used to. It wasn't that he was treating me like a mother-in-law. He was treating me like a woman. By the time we reached the checkout, my chest felt tight, as though I'd been holding my breath the entire time. He loaded the groceries onto the conveyor belt, his movements efficient, confident, while I distracted myself by studying the rows of candy and magazines. Anything to avoid staring at him too long. Back in the car, the groceries secured in the trunk, silence stretched between us. It wasn't awkward though. If anything, it was charged like a string pulled taut, waiting for the slightest movement to make it snap. I folded my hands in my lap, staring out at the sunlit parking lot when his voice finally broke the quiet. "You?" "No," Daniel said softly. "I've always admired you." My head snapped toward him, my pulse racing. "Admired me? What do you mean?" His eyes stayed on the road as he started the engine, but I could see the way his jaw tightened, the way his fingers gripped the steering wheel just a little too firmly. "I mean, the way you carry yourself. You're strong, you're graceful, Emily doesn't even realize how lucky she is to have grown up with you as her mother. A lump formed in my throat. Compliments weren't foreign to me, but from him, in that tone it felt different, heavier. That's very sweet of you to say, I murmured, trying to keep my voice steady. He glanced at me then, just for a heartbeat, but in that moment his eyes held something that made my breath catch. It wasn't the look of a son to his mother-in-law. It was something else, something forbidden. The car rolled out of the parking lot, the hum of the tires filling the silence as his words echoed in my mind. Admired me, strong, graceful. Why did it sound less like a family compliment and more like desire? I shook my head, telling myself I was imagining it. But then he spoke again, quieter this time, as though he wasn't sure he should be saying it at all. You deserve more than being left alone all the time. The words landed in my chest like a thunderclap. My hands tightened on my purse, my heart racing so fast I thought he might hear it. Daniel, I whispered, not knowing what to say, not even sure I should respond. But he continued, his voice steady, almost defiant. I see the way he treats you, the way he's never around. A woman like you shouldn't have to settle for being invisible. Invisible. The word pierced deeper than I expected, because it was true. I had felt invisible for so long, moving through the routines of a marriage that had grown hollow with time. My husband wasn't cruel, just absent physically, emotionally, in every way that mattered. And here was Daniel, speaking aloud the ache I had buried for years. I tried to laugh it off, to push away the storm he was stirring inside me. You shouldn't say things like that, I said, though my voice betrayed me with its tremor. Not? He asked, his tone sharper now, more insistent. It's the truth. The car was quiet except for the rhythmic sound of the tires against the pavement. I couldn't bring myself to meet his eyes, afraid of what I'd see there, and perhaps even more afraid of what he'd see in mine. Finally, I found my voice. Because it's not appropriate. That made him laugh softly, a sound, low and warm, like he knew exactly what he was doing to me. Maybe not, but sometimes the truth isn't appropriate. His words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. I stared out the window, my mind racing. 1,000 thoughts collided. At once shock, guilt, curiosity, longing. I wanted to tell him to stop, to remind him of the lines we could never cross. And yet, part of me didn't want him to stop at all. The ride home was quiet after that, but not peaceful. Every glance, every brush of his hand near the gear shift, every silence between us felt loaded. By the time we pulled into my driveway, my heart was in my throat. He parked the car and turned to me, his eyes searching mine. I didn't mean to upset you, he said softly. I can't watch you pretend you're happy when you're not. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words tangled in my throat. He leaned back, giving me space, but his gaze lingered. For the first time in years, I felt like someone was looking at me, not through me, not past me, but at me. That was what he said. Those were the words that left me shaken, questioning everything. Not just my marriage, not just the life I had built, but myself, my worth, my desires, my future. And though I told myself it ended there, deep down I knew it hadn't. Because once words like those were spoken, they couldn't be unheard. They had planted themselves in my heart, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't stop them from growing. It started out as something so ordinary, but I never imagined it would leave such a lasting impression on me. A simple trip to the store, a ride offered in kindness, and a quiet moment shared between two people who, by all appearances, should have been nothing more than family by marriage. And yet, as I look back now, I realize that was the moment everything started to shift. The moment when lines blurred, and I began to see my son-in-law in a way I never had before. That morning had been like countless others. My husband was away, on another one of his business trips, the kind that stretched for weeks and left the house feeling emptier than I cared to admit. I told myself I was used to it after all these years, but the truth was that the silence pressed on me heavier with each passing day. I tried to fill it with chores, television, books, and errands that didn't really need to be done. Anything to keep myself busy. I had written out a short grocery list. Bread, some vegetables, and a bottle of wine I thought I might save for when my husband came back. Nothing urgent, but enough of an excuse to get out of the house for a while. My car had been giving me trouble for weeks, sputtering every time I tried to start it. So I stood at the kitchen counter with my keys in hand, debating whether I should risk it or just walk to the store. That was when I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I peeked out the window, and to my surprise, it was Daniel, my son-in-law. His presence always carried a kind of warmth into the house. Something about the way he smiled, the way he moved, the way he seemed so present in every moment. He wasn't supposed to be there that day. He usually only came by with my daughter, Emily, or for family gatherings. But seeing him alone, stepping out of his car in a casual t-shirt and jeans, stirred something unexpected in me. He looked different outside of the formal family dinners, more relaxed, younger somehow, yet carrying himself with a quiet confidence that caught me off guard. I opened the door before he could knock. "Daniel," I greeted, surprised. "Are you doing here?" He smiled, that boyish grin of his that always seemed to put people at ease. "Hey, Mom," he said softly. He always called me that, even though he had a perfectly good mother of his own. I used to think it was just respect, but lately I'd begun to notice the way his voice lingered on the word, softer, more personal. "Emily mentioned you'd been having some trouble with your car. I was in the neighborhood, so I thought I'd check in on you." For a moment I was touched. It had been a while since anyone had looked out for me like that. My husband, busy with his job, rarely noticed the little details of my days. And Emily, caught up in her own world of work and marriage, didn't always have the time. But here Daniel was, showing up unannounced, simply because he cared enough to. "You didn't have to," I said, trying to hide the warmth in my chest. "But I appreciate it. Actually, I was just about to head to the store." "My car's not starting again, though." Without missing a beat, he offered, "I'll take you. Come on, it's no trouble." The words were simple, but something about the way he said them, firm, almost protective, made me hesitate for a moment. A ride to the store shouldn't mean anything. And yet, standing there with my keys useless in my hand, I felt a strange flutter inside me. I grabbed my purse, slipped on my shoes, and followed him to his car. The afternoon sun was warm, casting a glow over the driveway, and for a fleeting second I was aware of how close we were walking, the sound of his footsteps, steady beside mine. He opened the passenger door for me, a small gesture, but one my husband hadn't done in years. I murmured a thank you as I slid inside, and when he shut the door gently behind me, I felt something stir deep within my chest. The drive started quietly, the hum of the engine filling the silence between us. I kept my eyes on the passing houses, trying to steady the unease I felt. But then Daniel spoke, his voice low and calm. "So, how have you been?" Really, I mean. The question caught me off guard. People often asked out of politeness, but the way he said it, looking at me briefly before focusing back on the road, felt genuine. He wanted to know. He was listening. I hesitated, then sighed softly. "I've been fine. A little lonely, I suppose, with your father-in-law gone so often." I hadn't meant to admit that, but the words slipped out before I could stop them. Daniel's hands tightened briefly on the steering wheel. Yeah, I figured. Emily mentioned he's been away a lot lately. Must be hard. I nodded, swallowing. The lump in my throat. It is what it is. You get used to it after a while. He glanced at me again, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I felt as though he saw right through me, the loneliness, the longing, the quiet ache I tried to hide from everyone else. And then he smiled, softly, almost reassuringly. You shouldn't have to get used to being lonely, he said. The words were simple, yet they landed in my chest like a weight. My heart quickened and I turned my gaze back to the window, unsure how to respond. No one had ever said that to me before, not even my husband. It felt like something more than casual conversation, though I told myself not to read too much. Into it. We drove on, and I found myself hyper-aware of every small detail, the warmth of the sun on my skin, the faint scent of his cologne, the way his voice filled the quiet spaces in the car. It was just a ride to the store, but already it felt like something else, something I couldn't quite put into words. When we pulled into the parking lot, he parked close to the entrance and turned to me. I'll come in with you. Carry the bags. Make sure you don't have to lift anything. Again, such a small gesture. And yet, sitting there with his eyes meeting mine, I felt a strange pull. It wasn't just kindness. There was something deeper in his gaze, something unspoken but undeniable. For the first time in years, I felt seen, really seen, and that was the beginning. The moment when a simple ride to the store became the first step into something far more complicated, far more dangerous, and far more irresistible than I could have ever imagined.